Well, listeners, welcome to 2026 and Happy New Year from the Oz Sounds Unleashed crew. Great to have you with us again, and we trust that you continue to support the little podcast. As a note, we hit 100 downloads and streams, so I was pretty happy with that. And as you know, I'm your host of Oz Sounds Unleashed, Jason Plumridge, and today we're going to start talking about from streams to stages, planning, marketing and strategy for music artists heading into 2026, and try and give you some insight into how you might manage your music career just like a business, because that's really what you need to do. So going on one out today for the January podcast. Lots of other people are still on holidays, etc. So it's one out, it's just me. But we'll try and unpack some of this topic, and we'll get into the interviews as we head on into February, March and April, and we've got some really exciting interviews coming up with both artists and do-it-yourselfers for recording studios. But back to today's episode. The artists who will win in 2026 aren't waiting for a viral moment. They're building systems around their music, around their audience, and around their live shows. In this episode, we're unpacking how to think like a business without losing your soul, how to turn gigs into growth engines, and how to position yourself for long-term relevance in a crowded music industry. If you're done guessing and ready to move with intention to turbocharge your career, this starts now. We're breaking down what it really takes for a music artist to grow heading into 2026, from building a strong business mindset and planning intentional releases, to turning live shows into momentum, choosing the right venues and using media to control your story. We'll explore how all these pieces connect in one clear strategy designed for increased listenership, deeper fan engagement, and build long-term market presence. Finally, as always, in support of indie artists, we introduce our listeners to local acts, and to kick off 2026 with a bang, we introduced Relevance, whose journey and sound reflect the next wave of artists building with purpose and vision and rocking the local pub and club scene in and around Sydney. So today's episode, we're going, into a deep understanding of business strategy, particularly in the music industry. And if you're a music artist thinking seriously about your future, about your growth, your sustainability, your visibility heading into 2026, then this episode's probably for you. We're going to talk about planning, marketing, live performance strategy, venue booking, media presence, but not in a surface level way. This is about how all those pieces connect into one system, because in 2026, the artists who win aren't necessarily those with the most technical talent or the best songs, although these are also important. They're the ones that are most prepared for the industry. Your talent may open the initial doors, but strategy keeps them open, leading to increased opportunities and hopefully customers flowing into your shows and buying your merchandise, which is where the money's made. So whether you're just starting out, or you're already releasing music and playing shows, so I want you to listen to this episode and consider it from the perspective as if you're building a blueprint for the next phase of your career. So let's get into it. All right, so as I alluded to earlier, there's a couple of sections in this, and it's about putting a strategy together for you as a music artist to enhance your career, get more exposure, get those gigs that ultimately lead to cash in your pockets. And the first part about that is shifting into a business mindset. Now, what do I mean by that? The first thing that you must accept as an artist or a band as you head into 2026 is this. You're not just making music. It's not just the creative part, right? You're actually executing and starting a brand building exercise. You're trying to make your place in the market. You're trying to get yourself known in a sea of everybody else that's trying to do the same thing. So what is it about you that's unique? So that doesn't mean becoming corporate or inauthentic, but it does mean you have to understand how value flows in the modern music industry and in business in general. Streaming is not the business model anymore. It's only a part of it. Streaming is just the top of the funnel, a bit like the tip of an iceberg. The real mass and weight is beneath the waterline with the iceberg. So is your career. Streaming is just the top that gets you seen. It is not the substance that you continue through with your career. The real business of music money lives in live performances, your direct-to-fan engagement, your merchandise, your brand partnerships, your sync licensing, and your memberships and exclusives. Now, live performance has always been something that musicians enjoy and love to do, and you need to market that so that you get more tickets in the door. The ticket sales are what brings income into your pockets. And obviously there's a business relationship there with the venues. Maybe you're using a booking agent, maybe you get a cut of the bar or whatever it might be. You need to have all that documented down. Your direct-to-fan relationship. So, once you've finished your set, it's really imperative and important that you engage with those fans who've turned up at your gig, who've bought your tickets. They're the ones that will buy your shirts, that will buy your CDs or anything like that. So, really focus on that direct-to-fan relationship. Merchandise is important to have. People want to go away with something from a show. They're hyped up. You've played your best. They love your style. They love your music. They love your sound, and they want to take something home with them. And merch is that thing. So make sure that you've got that. It's well designed, and that you've got it available at reasonable prices. Your brand partnerships. Maybe you're branding with somebody else. Now this is a bit more, when you advance in your careers, I suppose. But you might be branding with another business. You might be branding or collaborating with a couple of groups of people, and you introduce them. You do that every day when you're on stage, and you introduce the next act, right? There's not much difference in that. The only difference is that you're getting some sort of remuneration from a brand partnership. And make sure that brand is aligned to your values, to where you want to see your career go. That sort of stuff. Don't make it something that's not music related at all. Thinking about sync licensing. Can you use your music under a contract in film, TV, and other things like that? And you might offer memberships and exclusives via social media to those fans, and they often donate to your cause essentially. So that's what you want to be thinking of. So you've got to shift into this business mindset. The key point is, if you don't know where your income actually is supposed to come from, then everything else becomes a moot point. And from a financial perspective, you'll never succeed unless you happen to hit the big time with your first song, resonate with a record industry giant and snag a contract against all other odds. But that's not very likely, all right? That takes a lot of work, a lot of preparation, a lot of support, and a fair bit of luck. So one of the most important exercises you can do as an artist is to define your audience clearly. Ask yourselves the following questions, and do this inside. If you're in a band as opposed to a solo artist, do this together. Maybe even if you're a solo artist, do it with a friend. But understand and ask yourselves the following questions: who is this music for? Right? Why am I writing this? What do they care about, and why do they care about my music? And where do they hang out online and in real life? Those are the places you need to be. So my advice to you would be to try to write one sentence, and it's this: my music is for the people who feel blank and want to feel blank. If you can answer that question, you can target your music, and you can start targeting your marketing. That sentence basically becomes your filter. It tells you what content to make, what venues to play, what brands to align with, and even how to dress and act on stage to a certain extent, to create that public persona that you want to adopt. Make sure that you have clarity of purpose and planning, and that beats controlled and unsupported volume every time, right? Purpose, planning, and clarity and control will every single time support, will supersede, unsupported volume every time. So my call to action for you: analyze your business model, your artist business model, in the context of your artistry, and truly understand the 5 W's and 1 H of your actions. Now, what do I mean by that? Understand the what, when, where, why, and who and how of your career, or the move that you're making, or the album that you're putting out, or the EP logo. Now, understand each of those elements. Why are we doing this? Where are we going to do this? When, from a timing perspective, what are we going to do? How are we going to make this happen? And make sure that's driven towards your fan base. Write this down and review it. Have your friends, colleagues, your mentors look over it and see if it makes sense, and then act on that. So having shifted into the business mindset, how do you actually enact in that? And I think one of the things is you need to have a release and content strategy for now. One of the biggest mistakes artists make is treating songs like lottery tickets. They drop a track, hope it pops, and then they disappear. There's limited follow-up, or they're too late or too slow to get the next one out, and you get complaints on social media, etc. from, well, when's the next song dropping, and when's the next video happening? That was great, and you lose that drive, right? In 2026, consistency beats virality every time, right? Artists who win are not chasing trends; they're building controlled release ecosystems. And what I mean by that is they're building that image, that persona that matches their music. So in 2026, successful artists don't release music randomly, right? They build and run a release ecosystem. Just consider for a moment a plan to launch a new song, an EP or a tour, right? You need to think in those 60 to 90 day cycles, just in the same manner as successful corporate business operates. You can't just run a corporate business by dropping a proposal. It's going to win. You do the work. It's not very well structured. It's not very well written up, and the client comes back to you. That just doesn't happen, right? That's not reality. So you need to consider that 60 to 90 day planning cycle. Now that's just an arbitrary time frame, but I think that's pretty good. 2 to 3 months. If you're longer than that with a song or an EP, you're probably going to lose some traction. So think of it like a corporate management improvement strategy. You define your audience, you define your product or service, you identify your customer segments because they're not all the same. Plan your approach to that market, and identify your unique selling points. You really are salespeople as well as musicians. You're selling yourselves, you're selling your art, you're selling your music. You need to provide some sort of value to the customers. What is it they're looking for? How do you provide that to them? Do they like one particular style? Was there something you did in one song that they actually gave you feedback on? And social media these days, that'll give you the feedback, both good and negative, of course. And some of that is you would just wash away and not worry about. But others actually have some good points, about I particularly liked what you did in that song. You've now gone back to this other thing you were doing in pop star or whatever. So receive that customer feedback, ask for it. Perhaps you test the market segment as well, and change and adopt as appropriate to meet your customers' requirements, because really that's what it is. You want to build a career in music. It's not just about you and your artistry. That's part of it. The other part of it is being able to sell that image, being able to sell that persona. And that's how you maintain and become viable for a long time in your music career. So operating in the music industry is essentially the same. You should have defined the processes for the engagement or launch pre, during, and post, whatever it is you're doing, whether it be a song or an MP or on a tour. So consider the following when you want to release, right? Every release should include a build-up phase, a release moment, and a follow-through phase, right? The song itself is not the event, the campaign that surrounds it is. So instead of dropping music randomly, plan it in that 60 day, 90 day cycles, right? So in month one, if we take a 90 day cycle, right? In month one, you'd tease the release, do some behind the scenes video footage, do some of that storytelling, G up the audience for what's coming and about to come. In month two, then you drop the single and your visual content. And it's really important to have visual content as well as the music, right? At the same time. It really does work well. And you might only drop the one single at that stage. And in a week later, you drop the second one. Or if it's an EP, you drop the EP at the end of that month too. Then you're going to do live performances. You may or may not do remixes later on, and collaborations with other people. So this is talking 3 to 6 months later. But every engagement you have with those fans, every time you contact them, every time you post something, you're actually building a relationship. And that's what you're really doing. Same as corporates, you build a corporate relationship with your clients. You are building a corporate relationship with your fans. So before you release anything, ask yourselves, what story am I telling with this song? What is it about? What visuals or other content support it? Do you need a full video cinematic type production? Probably not. That works in some instances. You might just need the behind the scenes foolery. If you're an indie rock band, and you're mucking around in the studio and stuff like that. People love that stuff, right? They really do like those posts and video content of the behind the scenes. It wins every time. How does this connect to the live show, the merch, or the fan engagement? Don't have them disparate, right? So if you're pushing the EP, then make sure that the merch supports the logos, the style, the fit. Get when you come to doing your own live shows and maybe you're headlining it, make sure you've got other bands and other artists that align with that similar style, because the fans are coming to see that similar style. There's no real point, in my view, and this is just my view, of putting a country artist with a metal artist with an indie rock artist. That really doesn't work. You want that same sort of industry area and that musical style that those fans are looking for. And then how do you then push people towards a show? You need to engage with them. You need to get the tickets out. You can't just run it up on and try booking, etc., and whatever else without any marketing behind it. You need to really do push that. And if you've got a community or a mailing list, and you really do need some sort of mailing list, some sort of community, so that you can contact your fans, right? Don't rely totally on social media, right? They change the algorithms. You shouldn't lose your fans. You should have a way to contact them. So your content also needs direction. Posting every day doesn't matter if it leads to anywhere. It doesn't lead to anything. So every piece of content should push people towards something, towards a streaming platform, towards a follow, towards an email or an SMS list, or even a live show, which is obviously what we want. So when you think about it, your short form video, which a lot of artists do, is just still the discovery engine. So TikTok and Reels and Shorts, they're the discovery engine. That's how people find out that you exist, right? Long form content builds that trust. So YouTube, podcasts, newsletters, that's where you engage with those people. That's where you put your longer form content, and that's where you get that, you build that trust, right? And it really is a trust relationship. You give them what they want, they give you the money that they have to keep your career going. And realistically, like I said, email and SMS lists build ownership, and they're really non-negotiable. You need to have that. You need to be aware of data privacy issues as well. So don't just leave them out on a public server or something like that. But have those lists, right? And they really are non-negotiable, because the algorithms on social media change all the time. Your audience shouldn't disappear with them. If you don't have a mailing list or other contact list in 2026, then realistically you're building on rented land, and you need to rectify that really quickly. So what is my call to action around this release and content strategy piece? It's really build a content conversation map, right? So build a mapping. So understand how the content you're producing links to the attention that you're seeking, links to the customer or the listener or the fan relationship, and then what action do you want them to do? So if you think about it, if you stream, you get the follow, they attend your show, and then they buy your merch, and they do that consistently, then you've won a fan for life, and that's what you're trying to achieve. All right, so now that we've planned out our release and content strategy, let's talk about pre-gig planning and that live strategy, because that's certainly important. So live performance is where artists turn listeners into fans and where careers can accelerate. But most artists treat gigs like one-off events instead of a strategic opportunity. There is so many people that go out and they get so excited about playing a gig. It might be the first one, it might be their 10th one or their 100th one. They're excited and they do the one-off gig, or they go and work with somebody else who's headlining it, and they simply do their set and they walk out. They don't then stand there, talk to fans, talk to the other bands, and promote each other. They don't talk to the venues. Maybe that venue can give you another gig a couple of weeks later. So you really do need to treat it like a strategic opportunity, right? So a show should start weeks out, before you even step on stage, right? It's not just about you stepping on stage, even if you are, the second or third band and not the headliner. So at least 4 weeks out, right? At least 4 weeks. You should be promoting the show as an experience, not just a gig date, right? Share rehearsal clips, create behind the scenes content, as we said before. Talk about why this show matters, what's different about the show. Collaborate with the other artists on the bill. Link to their socials. Really do promote this as an experience. What is the customer, what is your fan going to get out of it? They're going to get, not only do they get to see your music, which they may have seen before, but they're going to see other like-minded musicians that have great music that they definitely don't want to miss, right? You need to create that perception that if you miss this, it's FOMO. You've got a fear of missing out. So talk about why that show matters. Run geo-targeted ads around the venue, right? And obviously there's a funding thing of that, but you might be able to do that, right? You might be able to geo-target ads on social, or, not that I'm encouraging bill posting on public things, but, you see some of the people go up and put posters on local polls and stuff like that, right? It's the people in the local area that would generally attend the gig without a thought on a Friday or Saturday night, right? They're not going to come from miles away if they don't have an affinity with you as an artist or with you as a band. But the locals will, right? They just decide to go out on a Friday night and go, oh, we'll stop into this pub and that's where you're playing, or this live venue. So, you do need to geo-target those ads. Do all the prior stuff. Then on the day of the show, right, you need to think like an event producer, such as, how do we convert our fans or our attendees to customers at this show and in the future, right? You're going to have a section of people that are there for you, family, friends. You're going to have a section of people that just like your music and have heard you before and want to hear you live. And then you're going to have everybody else that's there for either no particular reason or are there for one of the other bands. You need to convert those guys into customers of yours, into fans of yours, right? And that's really what you want to do. So what can you do about that? You could do things like collect emails or QR sign-ups at the door, particularly if you're a headliner. But if not, have them on a business card, have them on some sort of format, pre-made laminated card so people can scan the QR code as you're talking to them. Maybe offer a discount code for the merch for signing up. Give them 10% off the t-shirt or whatever you got, right? Either on an online system later on or in person. Make sure you display clear merch pricing that is visible. Obviously some venues don't allow you to do merch, but a lot of them do. So have that clear merch pricing and make it reasonable prices, right? You're not Guns N' Roses, you're not Metallica, not at least yet. Don't charge $70 for a shirt, right? You're talking $20, maybe $25, obviously to cover your costs, but it's more about covering your costs and getting that fan engagement than making a hell of a lot in these initial stages. After that, sure, you can do that, right? You can do the signed posters, you can do a whole range of t-shirts, you can do whatever you want. But you need to get these people set first. So, but put that clear pricing, right? Clear pricing on what it is. If you're offering 2 shirts for a discounted price, then put that up there. People will do that if it's reasonable and they like your stuff, right? They want to go home with something. They want to have some memory, and that's what it really is building, right? It's an experience. It's a memory. It's kind of like Red Balloon, right? You go and buy those for the experience, not for a particular product, I suppose. For some of those things, those are the ones that are more important. Engage with the fans after the set, not just before it. Okay, after you've played, work the room. Go as a band and work the room. Don't just sit down with your family and friends, although that's important too. Go and work the room. Talk to other people, right? Talk to people you don't know. You don't know who's in that room. That could be a business owner. I've done it in the past. I've sat in the room and then I've asked people to come on the podcast, and that's been pretty successful. So you need to do those sort of things. You don't know who's in there. It could be a producer. It might even be a record label, right? So work that room. Support other artists on the card for the event. So promote them as well, right? You're not in competition. You're working together, right? So promote them when you're on stage. Mention them and how good they are. Of course, if that's true. But support the other artists on the card for the event in both pre and live. Capture your content at the show. There's nothing better than live video footage, live shots from you back to the crowd, performance clips, testimonials, that sort of stuff. It's great for your media marketing and socials. and plan for that post-show engagement. What happens after the show? So, after the show is where the growth really happens for you. So within the 24 to 48 hour period, not post that because it's too late. Post those performance clips. Thank the crowd and venue for attending. And really do thank that venue, particularly if they've done you a good deal, because they're struggling to keep live music on the agenda. There's been so many live venues that are shut. You really do need to thank those guys, and for continuing to support live music, because without it, you got no career. All right, tag everybody involved, even the promoters, that sort of stuff. Invite new fans to your next show or release, and every gig should leave a digital trail. So what I mean by that is, if nothing changes after your show, you've got no new followers, no new contacts, no new opportunities, then you're missing the point of playing live. Right? A show isn't just about a performance. Right? That's what a rehearsal's for. A show isn't just about a performance. It is a marketing asset, so you need to use it as such. So what is my call to action for the strategy piece here around live and pre-gig planning? Is to allocate responsibilities, right? As a group, follow up your attendees with the communications, just like a real business, which you are. Understand that. You are musicians, but you're also a business entity, and that business entity is what's going to make your career successful. Okay, so the next part I want to talk about is venue planning and booking strategy. Your venue strategy can make or break your momentum. You need to understand that this fundamental truth. Venues do not care who you are or who you know in most cases, right? They are a business. All they care about is who you can bring into their premises, right? Through your music, through your ticket sales, through your fan engagement, right? They don't care who you are, right? They get thousands of emails from all different artists from all over the place to play live at their venue. Right. For them, it's about, how do I keep this venue open? How do I keep live music on the agenda? And how do I make a profit out of it? Right. That's what it is. They're a business just as you are. So venues need money to operate, and you are their source of income, right? And their operational budgets. So there's a couple of things here. Either they charge you to hold the event and you rent the space, and they get a part of, they get nothing out of that because it's the funding that they've already rented to you. You've paid for the space, you've paid for the time, right? Secondly, it could be that they get a part of ticket sales if that's part of the agreement, right? Or some sort of other takings. If they don't get something, they don't get either the rent or they don't get part of the ticket sales or whatever, then they're likely not interested, right? And they'll want you to play for free, which is not a great result for you artists, okay? There are a number of different relationships and stuff. Yes, okay, in the start of careers, you might be playing some free gigs, right? You might be playing for a small amount of cash, but as you build your career, you can't continue that indefinitely. Okay, that doesn't mean you charge them thousands either, right? Because they just won't agree with that. That won't happen. It might be that you put on a headlining act with a couple other artists. You bring more people into their venue. They take all the drink sales, which is fine, and you take the ticket sales, right? That might be what the arrangement is, but make sure that arrangement is pre-written down. Choose the right venues. This is really, really important. Okay, start smaller and sell out consistently. Let me be clear. Bigger rooms don't mean bigger or faster career growth. In fact, the opposite can occur, right? And when you have an empty or half-filled room, that actually hurts your branding, hurts your reputation. Okay, and you're trying to build this. Much better to have a completely full small venue than to have a half empty or almost completely empty bigger venue, right? So make sure that you target your venues appropriately for what you think you can bring in. And you need to match your sound and audience to the venue's vibe, right? No point putting a rock act into a jazz bar. Okay, the general people that attend those jazz bars are looking for jazz fusion, not heavy metal, not rock, right? So pick your venue based on the vibe of the venue, and it's likely patronage. If it's wrong, you won't get where you want to. Just think about it like a jazz show being what's usually a metal venue. How well do you think that's going to go for the jazz artist? I don't think so. Right. Research the past shows at the venue, like who performed, what genres, what was the turnout size. Where do you fit into that ecosystem? So understand the types of acts that have successfully or unsuccessfully performed at that venue. And it's okay to say no to a venue. If it's not the right location, it's not the right vibe for your sound and your ambitions, and it's not going to get you to where you need to be, it's okay to say no. All right? You don't have to agree to every gig just to get on stage, and sometimes that can work against you. So do your research, and don't just accept a gig as if it's a chance to get on stage. Like I said, work with the other collaborators, especially if you're headlining that and you're arranging everything. Make sure it's the right thing, because you're not only impacting your reputation, you're impacting the venues, you're impacting your collaborators and your other bands. So how then do you pitch professionally to venues? They get a million emails every month about, I want to play my band here and blah, blah, blah. Right? Pitching to venues is a skill and somewhat of an art. And your pitch should include, at a minimum, the streaming numbers, but not just your totals. Like, what are your growth trends? How many have you increased over the time frame? Use that social media trend growth as a bit of a pitch. We've gone from 100 to 1,000 in the last 3 months. Your social engagement, not your follower account. How often you're posting, how often you're collaborating. When you pitch to a venue to put you on, maybe you have some proof of ticket sales or past attendances. So that's where those venue photos of the crowd come into play, right? If they can see that you've played a gig and there's 50 people in the crowd and their venue holds 60, then they know that they're going to get something out of it in terms of food, ticket sale, food, drink sales, that sort of stuff, right? So really important to do those. Get some high quality press level photos, right? Not just the ones you do yourself, right? Get some quality press stuff done. Yes, it'll cost you a little bit, but it'll be worth it in the long term. And live performance footage, really important, right? Really good live performance footage that's mastered. And you can do that yourself. I'm not talking about getting that professionally done. But just that live performance footage is really good to help venues understand what you like. And proof that you promote, right? So really important, especially on your socials, to promote the gigs that you're in, promote the other artists, promote the venues. And if you can show that to them, they're more likely to engage with you and more likely to give you a really good deal on a venue. When we're talking about touring, so you need a bit of a smart touring strategy, right? If you're going to do a tour. Touring should be strategic, not random selections, right? Not random selections all over the place. Know why you're going, where you're going, and what sort of audience you're going to experience, right? Cluster cities if you can, but build locally, right? Expand slowly. So if you're a Sydney-based band, work the Sydney circuit before you start branching out into Wollongong, Newcastle, and further afield, and even interstate. You want to make sure you've got a solid base on your locals before you go out, and density before scale, right? You need solid support before you try and upscale it to other venues. Local people are aware of who and bands and artists that are in their local area, and they will support those guys. If you're just dropping in from nowhere, that's very difficult to fill a crowd for. So your touring should be strategic, should be planned and controlled, and not random, like I said. Have a defined plan, an agreed plan, and do the budget accordingly, right? Tours usually do not pay for themselves. There's money coming out of your pocket, which is why big brands, big record labels organise the tours for artists, because they know they need to make enough money on the ticket sales and merch to cover the touring costs, right? You as local indie artists probably won't have that opportunity. You will have to invest something in it, but what do you get out of it? You get out of an increased fan base, the ability to perform, to meet other people, to grow your sound and grow your fan base, and that's what you're after. So what I would say is cluster shows geographically, right? Put them in the same location. Initially build locally and expand slowly. Why? Because you're in the same area, you're not incurring excess accommodation fees, excess fuel and travel stuff, and align release dates with your tour dates as best as practical, right? You want to be touring after you've done the release and not too far after, right? Partner with the local artists, because they're going to bring the audience, right? So if you're headlining a show in Wollongong, get 2 Wollongong gigs, 2 Wollongong artists to come and join you, right? that will bring their audience in to you, and then they'll get exposed to your style of music, and vice versa. Have sufficient merchandise available for sale, or at least an ability to order online at a later date. You can do that with a QR code if you want. They can buy it online. You can post it out later. But have a couple of shirts there or something or other, at least to show them what it actually looks like. If you can afford to do it and you've got stock, great. Take it to the show with you. If you've got CDs pre-prepared, take them to the show with you. Have that on that physical media and available for sale immediately after the gig. People love that. If they liked your music, they never heard it before, they want to go home with something, as I said. So that's how I would do pitching to venues, and that smart touring strategy. Remember, you're working together. All right, you're collaborating, and this is a constant thing. It's all about teamwork and collaboration within the artist pool. Whether you're a venue, a promoter, an actual artist, whatever, you need to work collaboratively with these people. All right, so finally, I wanted to talk about media, PR, and market presence. So media in 2026 isn't about chasing headlines. It's about controlling your narrative and telling your story the way you want it to be told. Whilst you're using social media to do those initial engagement pieces, podcasts, long-form interviews, behind-the-scenes content matter a lot more than traditional press for most artists. You're unlikely to get on the front page of the magazine, right? Unless your growth is substantial, or you've got some other industry contact that enables you to go straight in, then the traditional press for most artists is too costly, and you're not really going to get there. So what I would suggest you do is things like the podcasts, like the long-form interviews, behind-the-scenes stuff. Maybe you interview another band and you together engage on that. Whatever it is, YouTube will be the big one, along with podcasts like the Oz Sounds Unleashed podcast and others. Use those. So what generally do you need to prepare for media, right? And you should do some sort of media pack, right? Have it pre-prepared. And this is even to get an interview, right? What does media want? They want a story. What differentiates you as an artist or band? What is it about you that's unique, that is interesting, that they can market, that they can tell their listenership? They want that. What differentiates you? And if you can't explain what differentiates you as a band or an artist, then you need to go and rethink your strategy. You need to be consistent and reliable, right? So if you're going to do media, you need to be on time. You need to work with the media about question lists and stuff like that. What is on the agenda? What questions are off the agenda? All those sort of things. Don't assume that the interviewer is going to not ask you a poignant question. They may very well do that, and if you don't want to answer that question for a reason, you need to arrange that first, right? They after the authenticity or a unique angle to promote you from, right? They need to understand who you are, not just about what your music is, right? People are interested in human behavior, right? It's a psychological thing. They want to know who you are as a person. What are your beliefs? What do you believe in? Maybe even what your bloody political associations are, right? People are like this. They want to know who they're listening to and who they support. So, classic example, the bands that removed their stuff from Spotify due to the CEO supporting some military companies and whatever, right? They walked with their feet. Those are the sort of things that they want to know about you. Where do you stand on those sort of issues? Where do you stand on climate change, etc.? Right? Has nothing really to do with your music, but it does in reality, right? We're all on this planet together. Don't wait for the platforms to validate you, right? You need to push your own agenda. Don't just say to a media source, "Oh, I've got my socials. You can go and have a look at that." Right? Don't do that. Right? Put a proper prepared plan together. A really good way of doing this is to document your journey as a band, like where you've come from, when did you start, how did you meet, how long have you been playing together, has your influences and styles changed over time. Document that journey. That's a really interesting story, right? It's almost the rags to riches type storyline. Share any lessons that you've learned during interviews, right? After interviews, especially on podcasts and stuff, you're after the storytelling, the experiences. What happened? Classic example, when we did the second podcast, we spoke about one of the interviewees had a Lars Ulrich drumstick from a concert in, I think it was the Black Tour of Metallica and way back when, right? Those stories are interesting. That's what engages people. So if you've got stuff like that, things that worked, things that didn't work, some funny stories that might have happened, they're really important to stick into your media or interviews, right? And be honest about your growth, your setbacks, the issues you've experienced, what's difficult, what's been easy, who's helped you along the way. All those things are really interesting for a media story. Okay, have a pre-prepared media pack. Have a video of all the gang talking about the band together in a natural bush setting or some other seaside setting, whatever. Doesn't make any difference. Not just in a boring room, right? Have some light, have some nature in there. And artists who tell their story clearly don't need to shout out for attention, right? They really don't. They don't need to shout out, right? If your story is told, people know who you are. It's easier to get that engagement. So what would I say about media, PR, and marketing? Make sure that it's authentic. Make sure that it's real. Make sure that it's all about you and your backstory. And make sure you're consistent and you promote yourselves to those media sources. They're not going to come chasing you, okay, in general terms. All right, so having chatted through all that and what I think your strategies and stuff should be for 2026, what are my closing thoughts on this? As you head into 2026, remember the following, right? Music is the heart. Strategy is the engine. Consistency is the fuel. You need to plan intentionally, market authentically, execute relentlessly, and treat your career as a business. Use live shows as the growth engines and build that real relationship with fans, right? And finally, you can control your narrative through media. You need to remember that talent opens the door, but strategy and commitment is the one that keeps it open, right? So my final call to action for you guys and our listeners is plan with intention, market with authenticity, and execute consistently. And above all, be real. Be who you are as artists. Be who you are as a band, right? We really do need to make sure that you as artists are authentic in your style, are authentic to who you are, true to your beliefs, etc. And that's what engages fans to you. Your music is only 50% of it. Your strategy, your commitment, your execution, your engagement is the other 50. And if one or either is missing, then you're going to struggle to enhance your careers. So if this episode helped you, share it with another artist who's serious about their growth. And thanks for listening. And we'll see you for the next topic in February, which is actually about do-it-yourself studios. And we're going to talk to a guy called Rodney Dobbs who's built his own studio, and maybe one other person as well. And I know that will be of interest to some of you. All right, so as promised, in each episode we try to introduce you to a new and emerging artist, and this month's feature artist or band is called Aurelius, Aurelius, hailing from the western suburbs of Sydney in New South Wales. And if you look at their Spotify artist profile, it says it all, really. Aurelius is a raw, electrifying force that redefines the boundaries of rock and metal. Hailing from the gritty heart of the western suburbs of Sydney, this four-piece powerhouse is driven by an unrelenting urge to shatter conventions and push the sonic limits, fronted by the formidable Matt Long. Aurelius rips through every performance with a ferocity that demands attention. With vocals both haunting and visceral, this gives life to the lyrics that confront the darkest corners of the human experience. At the helm of their ferocious sound is Luke Clay, a lead guitarist whose shredding solos carve through the air like a blade. His riffs are sharp, unforgiving, and filled with chaotic beauty, pulling listeners into the perfect storm of distorted guitars and heavy rhythms. Aurelius is backed by a relentless rhythm section that holds ground with bruising bass lines and thunderous drums. Aurelius doesn't just play rock music, it commands it. This band doesn't just make music, they will ignite an experience that will stay with you long after the amps have stopped screaming, "We are Aurelius." Now, I love that. I love that promotion, especially around the topic we just discussed, mate. They stand their own. They put out there who they are, what they stand for, and that's exactly what I was talking about. And I saw these guys play the Soda Factory in Sydney, along with my son's band, Aphrodisiac, I believe it was, or it might have even been Daniel Aranda and the Midnight Pulse, I don't recall now. But these guys, they ripped it up, and they had a late time set. And they were absolutely fantastic, so I would definitely recommend you go see Aurelius at their next gig. You can see all their stuff on social media, particular Instagram, and we'll find the link and put that into the message when we post this podcast. So remember, Aurelius, Western Sydney, great 4-piece rock band, and well worth your time. Thanks for listening to Oz Sounds Unleashed, our first episode for 2026, and we appreciate the continued support. We trust you enjoyed the podcast, and please share it with your music and audio colleagues. We're happy to chat to anybody involved in the music and audio industry. So if that's you, contact us on Unleashed at ozsounds, ozsoundz.com.au. In our next episode, as I alluded in Feb, we'll be discussing do-it-yourself recording studios and what it takes to design and implement a dedicated rehearsal and recording space, on a budget usually, something a lot of indie artists are seeking to undertake. We'll be chatting with some locals that have built their own spaces or are planning to build their own spaces, and it promises to be an interesting insight into do-it-yourself sound studios and some of the issues that they've experienced in building that and getting them acoustically okay. We hope you've enjoyed the content, and please subscribe to our podcast on Spotify Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Overcast and other platforms, and also please follow Oz Sounds on all our social media and YouTube. One final thing, we do need your support to conduct our sponsorship program, and this is what happens is when we sell some music gear from our Oz Sounds online store, 10% of those profits go into and are refunded back into indie artists, right? So we can create events, we can fund some of your recording sessions, etc. So have a look at it, Oz Sounds Music and Audio. Check out the store at ozsounds, ozsoundz.com.au. And grab a deal on your next set of guitar strings, drumsticks, audio cables and more, and especially if there's something you need that's not on site, let me know and we'll try and source it for you at a reasonable price for indie artists. And remember that we've got our link tree, linktr.e/OzSounds. That's where all the links are. That's where you'll find all our social media. And I look forward to chatting to you in February along with some guest artists. Have a great month and see you later.